The first indication that something was wrong came from a radar return that should not have existed. At 2:13 local time, deep over the black water of the Gulf, the destroyer's spy, one radar painted 3 fast-moving objects emerging from the northern coastline. They appeared low, too low, less than 50 feet above sea level. Sea skimming profiles. Then one of them vanished. Not faded, vanished. Inside the Combat Information Center, nobody spoke for nearly 2 seconds. Only the hum of cooling fans and the sharp clicking of keyboards filled the dark compartment. Blue light washed across exhausted faces as operators leaned closer to their screens. Reacquire track. Nothing. The destroyer shifted 10 degrees starboard. That maneuver confused half the bridge crew because no launch authorization had been issued yet. The vessel was changing formation before command had even confirmed the threat, which raised the first question. What did the captain see that the radar operators did not? Outside, the Gulf looked calm. Moonlight cut silver lines across the water, but under the surface, tension had already begun compressing the region into something brittle. 2 American surveillance aircraft were airborne hundreds of miles apart. A carrier strike group operated farther south. Iranian fast attack craft had dispersed from several coastal positions earlier that evening. Nobody officially knew why. Then the second radar contact appeared. This one moved differently. Faster, not hugging the sea. Climbing. A missile profile. Track stable. The destroyer's AEGIS system began calculating intercept geometry automatically. Speed. Bearing. Estimated impact corridor. One projection line pointed directly toward commercial shipping lanes. And suddenly the situation became politically dangerous. Because if the contact was real, interception might scatter debris across civilian traffic routes already crowded with tankers. But if the destroyer waited too long, there would be no second chance. The captain requested confirmation from regional command. Authorization did not come. Again, the question deepened. Why was command hesitating? The destroyer continued turning anyway, not away from danger, toward it, in the darkness above the bridge. Lookouts could barely distinguish the horizon from the sky. Every distant light became suspicious. Every shadow looked like movement. Then electronic interference hit. Not powerful enough to blind the ship completely, just enough to contaminate confidence. Small distortions crawled across radar returns. Contact split into ghost echoes. One operator reported false altitude fluctuations. Another lost telemetry for almost 4 seconds. 4 seconds sounds insignificant until missile closing speeds reduced decision time to less than a minute. Inside the CIC, voices sharpened. Possible spoofing. Negative, track integrity partial. Reclassify unknown. Nobody wanted to say the real fear out loud. Electronic warfare meant preparation. Preparation meant intent. And intent meant this night might not end with a warning shot. Far to the north, an American reconnaissance aircraft intercepted fragmented radio traffic from the Iranian coastline. Most of it was routine, maritime chatter, patrol coordination. Then one phrase repeated 3 times. Window remains open. Analysts on board could not determine what the window referred to. Launch timing? Radar coverage? An escape corridor? The message reached the destroyer 6 minutes later. By then, the missing radar contact had returned. But now there were 5. The ship's threat matrix instantly changed color. Yellow became red. Operators tracked the objects racing southwest over the Gulf in stagger formation. One slowed unexpectedly. Another accelerated hard enough to suggest terminal guidance activation. Still no fire authorization. On the bridge, the captain stared through reinforced glass into empty darkness while waiting for command approval that should have arrived already. It did not. Instead, a second message came through. Possible friendly aircraft operating near projected intercept zone. Everything froze. If an unidentified aircraft had entered the engagement corridor, firing interceptors carried catastrophic risk. The destroyer could not assume every radar return was hostile anymore. And somewhere inside that confusion, somebody on the Iranian side may have understood exactly what was happening, because the electronic interference intensified immediately after. Now the radar picture became unstable in waves. Contacts blinked, reappeared, drifted. One target suddenly appeared to split into 3 separate returns before collapsing back into one. A junior operator quietly whispered the worst possibility. Decoys. That changed everything. If decoys were mixed with real missiles, the destroyer could exhaust interceptors against false targets while a genuine strike slipped through, and the Gulf offered almost no room for error. The sea itself amplified the danger. Low-altitude missiles could disappear behind wave clutter. Humidity distorted detection ranges. Night conditions compressed visual confirmation into seconds. The captain finally received partial authorization. Track. Shadow. Do not engage unless hostile intent confirmed. It was an impossible instruction, because missiles traveling hundreds of miles per hour do not politely announce hostile intent before impact. The destroyer accelerated. Water exploded outward from the hull as the vessel cut harder across the Gulf. Crew members grabbed rails inside narrow passageways, while alarms pulsed softly overhead. Then another problem emerged. Fuel calculations. One of the supporting aircraft monitoring the northern corridor reported reduced loiter time after extended rerouting earlier that night. Its surveillance coverage would collapse within 20 minutes unless replaced. Nobody had replacement. Coverage nearby. If that aircraft left station, an entire sector of the Gulf would briefly disappear from real-time observation. And somebody else knew it too. The radar contact nearest the coverage gap suddenly altered course directly toward the blind zone. Now the destroyer faced a terrifying possibility. The visible missile tracks might only be bait. The real attack could be moving somewhere the Americans were about to stop seeing entirely. Command still refused full engagement authorization, because Washington had another fear. If the United States fired first and later discovered the contacts were misidentified drones or reconnaissance systems, the political consequences could trigger regional escalation within hours. So the destroyer drifted into the most dangerous tactical position possible, close enough to die first, restricted from firing first. Then the sea lit up. A distant orange bloom flashed low over the horizon northeast of the formation. Not large, not an explosion, more like ignition. Every radar operator snapped toward their displays. New launch detected. This time there was no ambiguity. Velocity profile matched a missile. Seconds later, another ignition appeared farther inland. Then another. The Gulf transformed instantly from uncertainty into saturation. Alarm tones erupted through the CIC. The AEGIS system began assigning intercept priorities automatically, calculating impossible mathematics at machine speed, while human beings tried desperately to understand the larger picture. But buried underneath the flood of incoming data was a detail almost everyone missed at first. None of the missiles were aimed at the carrier group. They were converging toward a narrow maritime corridor farther west. Commercial shipping, oil transit routes. The carrier had never been the primary target. The destroyer had been maneuvered into the center of a strategic choke point, and suddenly the entire night looked different. This was the pivot nobody on board expected. The attack pattern suggested pressure, not annihilation, economic disruption, global shock, a controlled demonstration capable of detonating oil markets without directly sinking an American carrier, which explained command hesitation, which explained the electronic warfare, which explained why Iranian coastal signals kept repeating that strange phrase. The window remains open. They may have been referring to the strait itself. For several seconds, nobody inside the destroyer spoke. The realization carried its own kind of horror, because intercepting missiles over crowded shipping lanes could still trigger fires, panic collisions, or environmental catastrophe. But allowing even one missile through could shut down maritime traffic across the region overnight. Now there was no good outcome, only damage control. The captain requested immediate release authority. Denied again, not because Washington doubted the threat anymore, because another intelligence report had just arrived. An unidentified submarine contact had appeared south of the strike group. Everything changed again. The destroyer was no longer facing one battlefield. There were now potentially two. And command feared the missile launches in the north might be designed to pull defensive ships away from southern waters. The classic problem returned: diversion or main assault. No commander in modern naval warfare ever gets perfect clarity, only fragments. and fragments kill people. The submarine contact disappeared almost immediately after detection. That made it worse. A visible submarine is dangerous. A vanished submarine rewrites every tactical calculation in the theater. The destroyer finally received limited engagement authorization against confirmed inbound threats only. Too late for comfort. Missile intercept geometry, now compressed into seconds. Operators selected targets while software recalculated trajectories, continuously under electronic disruption. The first interceptor launched vertically into the night with a violent white flash. Then another. The deck thundered beneath the crew's feet, high above the Gulf. The interceptors curved sharply into darkness before their engines disappeared from view. Nobody on board could visually track what happened next. Only radar could. One incoming track vanished. Another continued, then split unexpectedly. Possible debris, or second stage. Nobody knew. The uncertainty was suffocating. Commercial vessels below began transmitting emergency traffic. Civilian captains reported flashes overhead. One tanker abruptly altered course without authorization, drifting dangerously near another vessel inside the corridor. Now the destroyer had civilian collision risk layered directly underneath an active missile interception zone. And then communications degraded. Not fully, just enough. Certain transmissions arrived fragmented, others delayed. One command relay repeated the same sentence twice before cutting out entirely. The crew could no longer trust timing. And timing is everything in missile defense. Another interceptor launched. This one missed. Not dramatically, not cinematically. The target simply continued moving. A cold realization spread through the CIC. The incoming systems were maneuvering. Whether drones, cruise missiles, or mixed platforms, they were not following predictable ballistic paths anymore. The engagement became ugly, messy, human. Operators manually reassigned priorities. One radar supervisor ignored protocol and elevated a low-confidence contact because its bearing looked wrong. That decision may have saved a tanker farther west. Or it may have wasted a multi-million-dollar interceptor on empty air. Nobody would know immediately. Outside, the Gulf had transformed into layers of invisible movement. Missile trails overhead, civilian ships below, aircraft circling farther south, electronic distortion. Everywhere. And underneath it all, the unseen possibility of a submarine. Then came the silence. For nearly 40 seconds, no new launches appeared. No new contacts emerged. Even the electronic interference weakened, which somehow felt more threatening than the attack itself, because experienced crews understand something civilians rarely do. Silence during combat often means repositioning, not peace. The captain stepped briefly onto the bridge wing. Warm Gulf air hit his face as he looked toward the northern horizon, where faint smoke still drifted above darkness. One officer quietly asked a question everyone had been avoiding. What if this was only calibration? Nobody answered, because limited missile activity can reveal enormous intelligence value. Radar response times, engagement doctrine, interceptor inventory assumptions, electronic warfare effectiveness. A short confrontation can prepare the map for a larger one later. Then the submarine contact returned, closer, southwest of the formation. This time acoustic analysts classified the signature differently. Not confirmed hostile, not confirmed friendly. Unknown. Again, always unknown. The destroyer could not abandon missile defense responsibilities to hunt the underwater contact, but ignoring it carried enormous risk if torpedoes entered the equation. The ship was being stretched across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Air, surface, subsurface, electronic, political, economic, and somewhere above all of it sat decision-makers terrified of becoming the side blamed for full escalation. Another radar operator suddenly noticed something strange in the engagement logs. Several incoming tracks had intentionally avoided direct impact routes against ships. Instead, they crossed near them, close enough to terrify, close enough to disrupt traffic, close enough to prove capability, but not close enough to guarantee destruction. That realization cooled the room in a completely different way, because controlled aggression is harder to answer than open war. It creates hesitation. And hesitation was exactly what had dominated the entire night. Hours later, the destroyer remained on station, while smoke haze drifted low across the Gulf under approaching dawn. Commercial traffic slowed dramatically. Regional air routes shifted. Insurance markets would react before sunrise. But the larger mystery remained unresolved. Why did the first radar contact disappear? Analysts later proposed several possibilities. Sea clutter masking, electronic spoofing, intentional stealth shaping, even coordinated decoy deployment. None fully explained it. And that uncertainty lingered long after the engagement ended, because modern naval warfare is no longer about simply destroying targets. It is about manipulating perception, overloading systems, forcing hesitation, creating enough ambiguity that powerful militaries begin questioning their own screens. As dawn finally touched the water, the destroyer maintained course through a gulf that looked calm again from a distance. But calm had become deceptive. Somewhere beyond the horizon, launch crews were likely already reviewing data from a night before. Somewhere underwater, an unidentified contact had vanished once more. And somewhere inside command centers on both sides, planners were probably arriving at the same disturbing conclusion. The next confrontation might not stay limited long enough for hesitation to matter.